Today, we examine the history of gambling and the St. Louis connection. That's next on City Corner. I'm Steve Potter, and welcome to City Corner. Well, today we're going to discuss a topic that I must admit I know very little about, but my guest certainly does. And we'd like to welcome James Doyle. He's the author of the new book, St. Louis Gambling Kingpins. Jim, welcome to the program.
Well, thanks. Glad to be here.
And you know, I have to say right up front, I want to be totally honest with you. I don't know anything about gambling. I don't think I've ever really gambled. I don't even play slots or do scratch-offs. Sometimes I feel like I'm the only one, am I?
I think so. It's very popular these days.
And not just these days, which is kind of the point of your whole book.
Oh, no, that's exactly right. It was very popular. The book covers from 1900 to 1950 approximately, and then brings it up to the current date as to what's going on. And what was taking place 100 years ago is taking place today.
Yeah. And I know before we get into specifics, because you are directly related to the storyline of this, but there was one part of your book where you mentioned like the biggest gambling places in the country at one time, and it was St. Louis, and I forget, was it Las Vegas, New York, Chicago?
No, the biggest ones were St. Louis, Chicago, New York, and New Orleans.
Right.
And remember, when I'm doing this from 1900 to 1950, St. Louis would have been the fourth largest city at the time. And so it was more of the, Los Angeles or Phoenix of its day.
Right. And I mentioned that you have connection, and you do. Tell me about your two uncles, Uncle Vic and Uncle Jim.
Well, my dad was in there too, and he was the youngest of 9 children, 8 boys and 1 girl, and Vic was the oldest. Jim was in the middle, and I was named after Jim by my dad. Mm-hmm. And Vic is the one who started the casinos in East St. Louis at the time, called Ringside Casinos. And so he operated those, and his brother Jim was the bookmaker. He operated the bookmaking operations.
And we're talking like after 1950?
No, in the 1930s, 1940s for them.
And for people, most people probably don't know anything about that or know that they were there. All those buildings are gone. It would be near the East St. Louis riverfront where like the highways are now, right?
Yes, that's correct. Missouri Avenue was the one on Broadway. That's where they were all done. And Broadway is the main street in East St. Louis that went to the Eads Bridge across the river to St. Louis.
Well, tell me just a little bit about your Uncle Vic and Uncle Jim. Were you close to them? Were they normal people?
Well, what happened is that I started involved with family research around 2008 and got interested in it and found out nobody knew about the Doyle family very much. And
within your own family?
With my own family. And I knew Vic, or Uncle Vic, and he and my dad were very close. And so we were from an Irish Catholic family, and Vic was my sponsor for confirmation, so I knew him from there. And Jim and my dad were real close, and he was my godfather. I was named after him. But he passed away when I was only a couple of years old, so I didn't really get to know him. But Vic I did get to know, and his family and that. When
you were growing up as a kid, knowing them, was the fact that they were so involved with gambling, was that on your radar then?
No, not really. I mean, what kind of got me going and looking at this, as well as the other individuals mentioned in the book, is that these were basically individual business people, the entrepreneurs of their day, or as I was calling them, gentlemen gamblers. Mm-hmm. That they were really not interested in crime, cheating, or things of that nature, but they enjoyed the idea of gambling.
Let's be clear. Everything they were doing was legal then, wasn't it?
Well, it depends on who you talk to. I mean, it was legal to them, but on the books, no, it wasn't. However, the politicians of the day made sure that it stayed open and there was no problems.
What made you want to tell this story?
Well, I was interested in the idea that you had these individuals that were out there, and they were well regarded in the community. And so I researched on my 2 uncles and that. I knew some things from my dad, and basically, it was the gambling part was somewhat of a sideline. I mean, I knew about it, but they were my uncles, so I wasn't as interested until later in life. And so I started researching them, and I started in newspapers.com, which was a great source, and they talked about Vic Doyle and his Ringside Casino, and the largest gambling casino in the Midwest.
I want to make a point about your book too. We've mentioned your two uncles. Your book is not about you talk about your two uncles in your book, but it's not about them. It's about like 40 other people too.
Yes, and the basis for it is that I thought in my uncle, he was very active, and he was a 4th degree Knights of Columbus, and any Catholic would know that's a pretty good honor to be at. And he was active in the community, and he was known for his charitable giving, and so both of my uncles were. And so they were, I considered them upstanding citizens, and I said, I just wonder if there were other people like that. So I started researching, and what happens is St. Louis was a big mecca for gambling in the 1900s, 20s, 30s, 40s, up until about 1950. And there was a reason for that, which we can talk about later. But I said to myself, I wonder if there are other people out there like that. And so I started researching around, and it just, I didn't specifically go to these towns, but it turns out that the big towns of their day were Chicago, New York, and New Orleans. And those contained people of the same ilk as Uncle Vic and Uncle Jim, where they were sort of entrepreneurs of their day, independent people, and did various casinos and bookmaking.
I'm going to read, you have a quote in the beginning of your book from someone that you write about in your book, and you can explain all this, but I want to read the quote and you can take it from there, because I think it's sort of interesting. This is what this person said, and it was in a Senate hearing, and tell me about it. Gambling is a biological necessity. It will be legalized.
That's true. That's a quote from James J. Jimmy Carroll, who's from St. Louis. And he was sort of the last of the independent entrepreneurs doing things. That hearing was what some people may know or may not know, called the Kefauver hearings. And that was a hearing into organized crime. And that the concern was in those days that organized crime was infiltrating the independent business people and gambling, of which my uncles were one, and that they were investigating that. And Carroll, because he operated both in St. Louis from cigar store, as well as with my uncle in East St. Louis. And we talk about him, but he was brought in to testify, and he made that statement.
It says a lot.
Right.
So were your uncles, did they seem rich to you? Did they have an opulent lifestyle, or did they seem like just normal people on the outside?
Well, they had, Uncle Vic drove a Cadillac, so I'll say that was opulent for its days. But no, they weren't overly opulent in that. I mean, they dressed nice, and they, were at church, went out to dinner, had family.
All right, we have some images from your book. You have a different chapter about different people, so we're just going to start there. And this first one we're going to look at, tell me who the Turf Man says. And you say in your book that he laid the foundation for betting on modern horse racing.
Yes, he's from...
Excuse me, I jumped ahead. We need to look at this image first.
Okay, well, that image that we're showing there was a drawing that was in the newspaper at the time. And St. Louis area in 1900 had horse race tracks. And the idea of gambling in those days, while there were casinos and card games, the biggest form of gambling was horse racing. And there were a number of tracks in St. Louis and East St. Louis at the time. And what I was showing in here is this was around 1904, 1905, that St. Louis was the first to include night horse racing, and also winter horse racing. So it's a glass enclosed thing that had a little potbelly stove in there to keep the people warm.
All right, let's go to that image that I started with, the Turf Man, and tell me who he was and what his connection was with modern horse racing.
Well, he was he was an immigrant.
It's Barney Schreiber, is it?
Yes, Barney Schreiber. And he was an immigrant, and he started off in Kansas City and came to St. Louis and started, he's kind of renowned for, he took a $20 bill and turned it into $1 million by horse racing, which would be like $20 million today. And so he went from betting on the horses to raising the horses. And this picture where we're showing here is he had a famous horse that was winning by a nose, and he took that all around the country. So he became nationally known for his horses and winning at the races and his betting.
Let's take a look at the next image. And you call this guy a multiple kingpin. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's Mont Tennis, not Montgomery, but just Mont is all I was able to find. And Mont was from Chicago, and he started off in the 1900s in that, and was going forward on the north side of Chicago is where he was from. There's another fellow in the book called Big Jim O'Leary. He was from the south side, but Mont.
And we're talking about late 1800s, right?
Yeah, 1890s, 1900s, correct. But Mont, what he did was his, where I say multiple, people were betting on the horse races. And so in order for the bookmakers to make book, they had to know what horses were racing and who was winning them. And so he set up people at tracks to cover the races, to phone in what was taking place. And then that morphed into a race wire service.
And also, bad things happened, didn't it? Was it the mob? Wasn't his house blown up and his business?
Oh, he was blown up, yes, yes, the bombing and everything. But he started off where he had the race wire service, and the first race wire customer was in St. Louis. And so what the race wire service did was that it provided a bookmaker in St. Louis or Chicago or Philadelphia with the opportunity to place up which horses were racing, what the odds were, and who won. And they could pay off or they could lose on it. And so what happened is that he was doing that on a great deal. And then he ran into, of all people, Al Capone, who liked to bomb people too. And so he wound up selling his race wire service to a group. And then that race wire service became national. It expanded around the country. So all the bookmakers in the country were subscribing to it.
All right.
And I think I pointed out in the book that he wound up leaving an estate valued at about $400 million in his day. That was 1940.
I was going to say that's a lot now.
Oh, yeah.
Jim, we need to take a little break, but we'll
Okay.
pick up on gambling kingpins when we come back on City Corner.
What I love about St. Louis is the 79 unique neighborhoods nestled into 108 city parks, including Forest Park, which is actually larger than Central Park in New York, and of course, the beautiful Tower Grove Park where I'm at now. Oh, the St. Louis Blues. We've got the St. Louis Surge, two-time WBCBL champions. We've got Harris Stowe, WashU, St. Louis University, and of course, the 11-time World Series champion, St. Louis Cardinals. So come experience St. Louis.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move. So I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
Multiple studies have shown that marijuana can slow both driver reaction and response time, which can be really dangerous. He's here. He's here. Wait. What? I can't drive. Why? I'm high. Oh.
Luke!
911, where's your emergency?
Everyone's on their way. What happened? She's dead? Yes, please get my mom and dad. Oh my God!
When I was 10, my mom got deported. We had a difficult time, and I feel that's why I didn't get to finish school. My husband is really supportive in a way that he pushed me to go back to school.
She wants to have a career so her kids can look up to her.
They both keep me motivated to go to school, and they see that if I do it, like they can do it too, you know? I feel that everything's possible.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
I'm Steve Potter, and welcome back to City Corner. We're talking with James Doyle today. St. Louis Gambling Kingpins is his new book, and it's about the history of gambling in St. Louis and across the country, particularly here in this area. And Jim, you already told us that you have a family connection. You had two uncles that were in the business, and it was a big-time business back then. And before we pick up on that, just real briefly, I just want to know a little bit about you, your background. I know that you grew up in East St. Louis. I know that you have a couple of degrees from SIUE. What briefly would you like to tell me about your career and yourself?
It had nothing to do with gambling.
Okay. Do you gamble today?
No.
Okay.
People ask why. I said, well, we used to own a casino, so I know to stay away from them.
Right.
Myself. Well, I've sort of had varied careers here, giving away my age a little bit here, but after graduate school, I was involved with working in banking and research and created a report called Bank Market Analyst we used to publish around the country. And then when banks started merging too much, I wound up getting into real estate investments. And then a few years ago, I decided to after my wife passed away, I decided to do a lifestyle change and sold off that and said, I'm going to write a book. And if I can get it published, I'm going to write some more.
And you're an Army veteran, and you were in Vietnam for a while.
Yes, I was.
So,
yeah.
And you're going to write a book about that.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Right.
Let's go back. We have a photograph from your book of your Uncle Vic, who you've mentioned and talked about. So what do you want to say about him?
Well, he was a pretty decent fellow from what I remember. As I said previously, he was involved with me as a child in different religious...
And what was his casino's name?
Ringside Casino is the name.
And was it a fancy place?
Well, it was, he had different gyrations of the Ringside Casino, where it started off in one place. Missouri Avenue is where it was at, which is where we talked about. It's now a highway.
Right.
And so then he also moved on Broadway, right at the foot of the Eads Bridge. And so one of the things became popular was that they had car services that they would put across the Eads. Uncle Vic's group did, and they would pick up people there on Washington Avenue and bring them on over to the casino with the thing. And then they built a fancy steakhouse here called Bush's Steakhouse, which is right next to it also, so for the eating and that. And it turned out to be the largest casino in the Midwest.
That's amazing.
Right.
Hey, we've got images of 5 posters. These, we're going to go through these pretty quickly. Just say something brief about them. But these were all from the Post-Dispatch.
Right.
What's the story?
Well, it was from an article in the Post-Dispatch, and the date on there, 1944 is when it was done. And their chief artists went in there kind of undercover and did all these drawings in crayon. And so we were able to kind of extract that from the newspaper at the time and turn them into posters. But it basically shows what was occurring at the Ringside Casino on that particular date. And this one here is rolling the dice. So they're...
Let's just flip through them quickly.
So we have rolling the dice there, and we have blackjack there. And then there's some more where they're playing roulette, and you could see the lady in the background with the one-armed bandits of the day, with the slot machines and that. So it was a multifaceted casino with all the work, and you could kind of see with the people there, there was a range of people. I mean, men, women, and it wasn't just salty old men there.
Hey, that brings back a point. I guess, were women allowed to go to gambling houses back in the old days? I would think not.
Do you see the pictures?
Well,
yeah, the answer would be yes, they were. Yeah, they were. And a lot of them, well, you could see they were at the blackjack table and they were at the dice table. And
let's take
and that particular picture there is kind of relevant today. Younger people probably wouldn't recognize it, but that's your bookmaker in operation. They're posting the results of a horse race and the people betting on it. Nowadays, it's all computerized.
Let's go back to the book and talk about some more people that you profiled. There's a guy named Mo, and I know he eventually ended up in prison, right? Yes,
yeah, Mo Annenberg. And he's a kind of a big family name. Walter Annenberg was his son, and he's the one that had the TV Guide publication.
Really?
Yes. But Mo Annenberg got his start in Chicago, working for the Hearst Group with trying to get newspapers out. And he wound up buying Mont Tennis's Racewire service. And then he also started the Daily Racing Farm, which also started in Chicago. So he literally had a national monopoly on horse racing and betting.
This is probably a general question. I don't know if you can answer it. Because we already know some bad things happened to some of these people. These successful, big-time gambling kingpins back then, did something bad happen to all of them?
Well, I'd say that at least my experience and what I was able to uncover is that Vic's place, as well as some others in East St. Louis, got bombed. They tried to bomb them out of business into the 1940s.
You mean the mafia did?
Yeah,
organized crime.
Organized crime did. And they did the same thing in Chicago, too. Mont Tennis was bombing. In fact, at Vic's place, there was an article that says that Vic Doyle's Ringside Casino was getting more bombs than Berlin at the time.
Jeez. Mm-hmm. Let's take another look at another person you profiled in the book, Tom Kerney.
Yes,
is that how you pronounce it?
Well, your guess is as good as mine.
Okay.
I haven't been able to find any of his relatives.
Evidently, he was born on the south side of St. Louis in 1871. You say he led a colorful and eventful life, and he came to be known as the Big Store. What's all that about?
Well, he ran a cigar store at 4th and Walnut, which is right by the old cathedral where we're talking about today. And he rose up to be in betting, where he would take high dollar bets, and he created odds for them, and he was the bookmaker. And when the times got tough in St. Louis that they didn't like that, well, then he went across to East St. Louis and did the same thing. But he became highly respected. There was in the 1920s there was a Kentucky Derby going on, and they were taking bets on who the winner was going to be. And it turns out that particular year, a real long shot, won, meaning that all the bookies had to pay out. And there were only two bookmakers in the country that were able to do that. Tom Kerney in St. Louis and Tom Shaw in New York. And Tom Shaw is also highlighted. And so they paid, the others didn't. And then they became golden to the country for betting.
I'm wondering, when we're talking about gambling in St. Louis, was the way it worked on both sides of the river the same, or was it different?
Well, it was the St. Louis side was a little bit harsher, I would say. That they were trying.
St. Louis side was
right. They were trying to close them down more. Police were more.
They followed the law more.
Well, yes. Basically, although Tom Kerney had his tobacco shop there at 4th and Walnut, where in the back is where all the bets were made.
Oh, I see.
Right.
Yeah. Let's take a look at another person, Tom Shaw.
Right.
You talk about his betting was as big as his physical size.
Yeah, he was 6'5", about 250 pounds, so he's a big guy. And he was from New Orleans originally. And he actually got tied in with Barney Schreiber and his horses, and then wound up going to New York to the big tracks there, Saratoga Springs. And that's where he sort of set up shop there. And he was the king of the odds makers in New York for about 40 years, and he lived to be 99.
Wow.
So.
The next person we want to take a look at is James Carroll, and he was the guy I quoted in the beginning, right?
Yes, he is, and he was literally the person who took over when Tom Kerney passed away, and so he was the one that took what they call layoff bets, in other words, high dollar amount bets, and he would set the odds, and so they would publish his odds in the newspaper for the horse races, baseball games, presidential races, things of that nature. And so when they had the Kefauver hearings in 1950, he was called in, and he had to testify that they asked him, well, how much money did you take in? And he says, well, $20 million in bets. And he said, but I didn't keep it all. He had to give away some of it. But after that hearing, then he stopped taking bets.
Now, while most of your book does focus on the history from early 1900s and such, you do address like the Argosy Casino.
Yeah.
Which was the first one on the scene here, and then the Casino Queen.
Well, what happened is sort of in the history is when we get to around 1950, that's when the Kefauver hearing and the organized crime and everything. And the organized crime, who I mentioned in the book here, is about Buster Wortman, was the representative of the Al Capone's group. for both St. Louis and East St. Louis. And so they literally ran the independent guys out of business is basically what happened. And from about 1950 on to about 1990, the biggest thing in gambling was Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say that people stopped gambling in St. Louis or East St. Louis. That isn't the case.
You didn't tell people. Right?
Exactly right. And then they started, it became a tool for economic development. And the riverboats started with it. And then they started in, 1990, 91. Mm-hmm. That's when the Argosy there in Alton and Alton Bell. And then on the Mississippi with the Casino Queen and all of that. That's when those started.
Jim, we've just got a couple of minutes left. I'm just curious, though, did you have any problems when you started to do this, like family members or anyone? Was some of this too personal?
Well, I tried to get, of course, most of the ones intimately involved have passed away, but I did try to find relatives. I have a cousin who's Vic's his uncle too, and so I wanted to make sure that they had it. And then Vic's granddaughter, I wanted to make sure that she was alive and well. And they were all in agreement with what I was saying and well pleased with it. So I did try to find people.
What do you want people to walk away from with this?
Well, that you have kind of a changing society, really. That you had something where you had individuals that they were entrepreneurs of their day. Today they'd be in hedge funds. Then they were in bookmaking.
Right. Okay, we've got a minute left. You mentioned you were a Vietnam vet, and you're going to write a book about that. You got a couple of things in the works. What are you working on?
Well, it's the working title is called Daring Yankee, and it's about my experiences in Vietnam. That I was there in 1968, 69, and I was kind of there where a lot of action was going on. I was going to describe that, and Daring Yankee was my call sign. That's where it came from.
All right. Well, the book is St. Louis Gambling Kingpins. James Doyle is the author. I guess it's available wherever books are sold.
Yes, it is.
And of course, there's some information on the screen. You can go to historypress.com and find out more about that. Did you inherit any gambling money, or you don't have to sell?
No.
I bet you've been asked that before.
Yes, I have.
Hey, Jim Doyle, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a fascinating book, and I didn't know anything about the history of gambling in St. Louis, and it was great to read it.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And gamble on City Corner any week. That's what I should tell the people out there. Thanks for watching. I'm Steve Potter. We'll see you next time on City Corner.